Let's begin here, because most of us were taught the wrong lesson. We were told that beauty belongs to the young. We were told that age takes away radiance. We were told that with each passing year, desire fades. But those beliefs are shadows cast by a culture that fears true feminine power. A mature woman is not less magnetic. She is more. She has walked through years of loss and renewal, and her presence carries a depth no surface charm can replace. Attraction is not in the wrinkle or the curve. It is in the soul that no longer hides. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's move deeper. The surface world often confuses masks with essence. A mask can look polished, but it is empty. True power comes when the mask drops and the authentic self emerges. Jung observed that what society calls aging often unveils the very qualities that make a woman magnetic. Why? Because individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires time. It requires confronting the shadow, the hidden desires and instincts we were told to bury. When those parts are integrated, a new kind of energy appears. Not the restless energy of youth, but the grounded fire of someone who has met herself fully. This is why the common myth about fading worth is so destructive. It blinds women to their own inheritance. It convinces them to fear the mirror instead of treating it as a doorway. A younger woman may still wrestle with her persona, the smiling mask meant to please. But a mature woman who has touched her shadow begins to radiate an unshakable presence. She no longer asks, "Am I enough?" She embodies the answer without speaking. Think of the difference in tone. One woman strives to be chosen, bending herself into the shape others demand. Another chooses from within, resting in her own rhythm. The first drains her energy, the second gathers it. Men may not understand this consciously, but they feel it. It is the quiet magnetism of a woman at ease with her own soul. So here is our foundation. Sexuality, attraction, and magnetism do not decline with age. They transform, they deepen, they grow roots. The shadow once feared becomes a source of vitality. The persona, once rigid, softens into truth. And from that union, the mature feminine presence emerges irresistible, not because it pleads, but because it simply is. In this journey, we will explore the path from mask to essence. We will uncover how what society calls vices are in fact sacred virtues. And we will see that the very qualities once hidden are the ones that hold the key to lasting attraction. This is where the story begins. Every transformation begins with a break. Not a violent explosion, but often a quiet crack that reveals what was hidden beneath the surface. For many women, this fracture comes when the mask they have worn for decades no longer feels livable. Outwardly, life may still look steady, even respectable. But inwardly, something begins to rebel against the constant pressure to remain composed, agreeable, and unshaken. That inner rebellion is not failure. It is the first sign of truth, pressing against the walls of persona. The fracture often arrives in small, ordinary moments. a casual remark about aging, a dismissive gesture at a gathering, a silence at the table when your voice is overlooked. These may seem trivial to others, but they pierce deeply because they echo a lifelong conditioning that a woman must shrink herself to remain acceptable. The wound is not new. It has been layered over many times with smiles, with politeness, with silence. Yet one day, the covering grows too thin, and the hidden hurt begins to show through. Jung taught that the persona, the social mask, is necessary but dangerous when mistaken for the whole of the self. It allows us to function to be seen as appropriate, but it can also suffocate our vitality. When cracks appear in the persona, the shadow stirs. The shadow is not evil. It is everything pushed aside in the name of being proper. Desire, anger, hunger, wildness, all of it waits behind the mask, carrying energy that longs to be lived. The first fracture is the moment when these energies refuse to remain invisible. What happens in that moment? A woman may feel shame rise quickly, as if she has broken a sacred law by wanting more, by demanding attention, by refusing to disappear. Yet beneath the shame is something even more important: recognition. For the first time, she feels how much she has lost by always performing the expected role. The fracture is painful because it reveals how long the soul has been denied its voice. Consider how this plays out in intimate life. A woman may have given decades to pleasing others, to keeping peace, to avoiding conflict. Her needs were quietly set aside, her body kept in dim light, her desires spoken softly or not at all. On the surface, she may be admired as patient, accommodating, or easy to live with. But beneath those labels is a life force quietly starving. The fracture occurs when she realizes that the mask of patience has cost her the experience of passion, that the mask of being agreeable has left her unseen in her own home. This moment of awareness is unsettling, even frightening. It can feel like disloyalty to family, to culture, to the image of what a good woman should be. But Jung reminds us that no growth occurs without tension between opposites. The persona says, stay calm, stay small, keep harmony. The shadow says, claim space, speak truth, embrace hunger. The fracture is the moment when these two voices collide and silence is no longer an option. Symbolically, this break often feels like standing before a mirror. For years, the mirror was avoided, or it reflected only what culture wanted you to see: flaws to correct, roles to fulfill, expectations to maintain. But in the moment of fracture, the mirror shows something different: the eyes of a woman who knows she has betrayed herself by pretending too long. That recognition cannot be unseen. It becomes the seed of change. This is why so many feel a sudden wave of grief at midlife. It is not simply about age or time passing. It is the grief of realizing how many years were lived under the weight of other people's stories. The grief of feeling how much of the shadow, the vitality, the desire, the raw energy was banished in order to appear acceptable. This sorrow is sharp, but it is also sacred. It marks the end of unconscious living and the beginning of individuation, the path of becoming whole. The first fracture often shows itself in relationships. A woman may feel the old patterns grow. Intolerable conversations where her needs are dismissed, intimacy, where her body is treated as secondary roles that demand sacrifice without recognition. What she once endured silently now burns within her as a form of quiet rebellion. She may not yet speak it aloud, but her soul has begun to withdraw its consent. This inner refusal is not weakness. It is the first act of self-respect. To outsiders, this shift can look confusing. Friends may notice she is less patient, less willing to go along. Family may complain that she has changed, that she no longer gives as freely. But the truth is that she has stopped giving herself away. The fracture does not create selfishness. It reveals the cost of endless self-denial. In Jungian terms, this is the moment when the unconscious demands recognition. The shadow knocks at the door of consciousness, asking to be seen not as enemy, but as ally. The parts of the self that were labeled too much or not proper now demand inclusion. When this demand is ignored, symptoms appear: depression, restlessness, even illness. But when it is honored, the fracture becomes an opening a doorway to deeper wholeness. Think of it like a seed breaking open. From the outside, the split looks like destruction. The shell cracks, the form is lost. The neat boundary disappears. But from within, life is beginning. Roots push downward, shoots stretch upward, and something entirely new begins to take shape. So too, with the first fracture in a woman's carefully constructed persona. What appears like breakdown is, in truth, the start of breakthrough. This stage is not comfortable. It shakes identity and unsettles the familiar. Yet, it is necessary, for no true transformation can occur while the mask remains intact. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The first fracture is precisely this: the darkness of denial becoming visible, the awareness that something vital has been exiled, and the dawning sense that it must be restored. If you find yourself in such a moment, recognize it for what it is. Do not rush to patch the crack or hide it from view. Do not force yourself back into the mask that no longer fits. Instead, pause. Feel what has been denied. Notice the hunger, the longing, the anger, the joy, whatever stirs behind the wall. These are not enemies. They are the fragments of your own soul calling you back. This is the meaning of the first fracture. It is not the end of your story, but the beginning of your return to authenticity. Without it, no integration is possible. With it, the path of individuation becomes clear, to gather all the pieces, light and shadow alike, and walk forward as a whole being. So let the fracture come. Let the silence break. Let the mirror show what you once feared to see. For it is only when the mask begins to slip that the face of the true self can finally appear. When the mask begins to crack, another drama unfolds. It is the ancient tension between the persona and the shadow, between the image carefully built for the world and the unspoken truths hidden inside. This struggle is not abstract. It is felt in the body, in the restless nights, in the words caught in the throat, in the sudden flashes of anger or longing that seem to come from nowhere. What is surfacing is not madness. It is life itself demanding to be acknowledged. The persona is what we show others. It is the polished role mother, partner, professional caregiver, the one who is reasonable and reliable. It is the soul at the dinner table, even when sorrow is heavy. It is the polite refusal when desire is burning. It is the graceful silence when boundaries are crossed. The persona keeps order, but at a cost. For if we live only in this mask, the self becomes divided, and the unlived parts of us turn inward, as resentment, fatigue, or numbness. The shadow, by contrast, is what the persona excludes. It is the bold voice that says no when others expect yes. It is the hunger for closeness after years of pleasing others without being nourished. It is the joy of being fully seen, the rage at being ignored, the pleasure in one's own body, the untamed instinct to lead rather than follow. These qualities are not evil, they are life forces. Yet because they do not fit the role assigned by society, they are pushed underground, where they grow darker the longer they remain unseen. Jung often reminded us that what we resist does not vanish. It waits, and when it returns, it does so with double strength. This is why a woman who has lived decades inside her persona may one day feel overwhelmed by sudden eruptions of emotion. A quiet remark may ignite fury. A neglected need may awaken deep sorrow. These are not signs of weakness. They are signals from the shadow demanding recognition after years of exile. In relationships, this conflict shows itself in repeating patterns. She may stay silent when she longs to speak, then later feel bitterness at being unheard. She may comply with intimacy that does not satisfy her, then feel restless or detached afterward. She may project strength and calm to the world, yet privately feel an emptiness she cannot explain. Each of these moments is the shadow knocking at the door, reminding her that the cost of the persona is too high. The price of living only through persona is clear exhaustion, invisibility, a slow erosion of self-worth. When you wear a mask long enough, others begin to believe it is your real face. They stop asking what you truly need. They stop looking for your fire. And soon you yourself forget that the fire was ever there. This is the great danger, that the mask becomes a prison and the shadow becomes a stranger. But the shadow never disappears. It finds ways to express itself indirectly. Sometimes through symptoms of the body tension, sleeplessness, illness, without clear cause. Sometimes through subtle sabotage, forgotten commitments, sudden indifference to duties once fulfilled with care. And sometimes through longing dreams, where the hidden self plays out its forbidden desires to speak boldly, to walk away, to live fully, without apology. These eruptions may feel disruptive, but they are not enemies. They are messages. They reveal what the soul cannot continue to suppress. Here lies the heart of the struggle. The persona whispers that survival depends on being acceptable. The shadow whispers that life itself depends on being authentic. To choose only persona is to die quietly, one concession at a time. To choose only shadow is to burn bridges recklessly, destroying what has been built. Individuation asks for neither extreme. It asks for integration, a conscious union, where the persona no longer denies the shadow, and the shadow no longer storms the persona. Imagine a stage lit from one side. The persona stands in the spotlight, graceful, composed. The shadow waits in the wings, hidden but restless. When the two never meet, the performance feels incomplete, brittle, lacking depth. But when the shadow is invited onto the stage, the play becomes whole. The audience feels something true, something alive. So it is with us. Our wholeness is not in perfection, but in allowing both the mask and the hidden face to stand together. This struggle is not resolved in one moment. It is lived daily. Each time you suppress your desire to keep harmony, the persona gains ground. Each time you honor your desire, even in small ways, the shadow is integrated. The tension will remain. But with practice, the two can learn to speak to one another rather than fight. The persona can remain as a necessary tool for the outer world, but the shadow becomes a trusted inner guide, offering energy, creativity, and vitality. What does this look like in lived experience? A woman may begin to notice her patterns. She sees how often she says yes when her body says no. She sees how often she hides her pleasure for fear of being judged. She sees how often she polishes her speech to sound proper when her truth is raw. Each recognition is painful, yet also liberating. For once, you see the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it. Awareness is the first act of freedom. The integration of shadow and persona is not about rejecting one for the other. It is about letting them meet. The mask can still serve its role in public, at work, in the necessary rituals of society. But beneath the mask, the soul breathes freely, no longer silenced. This is the beginning of authenticity, when the outer role is carried with awareness, but the inner truth is never abandoned. Jung called this process individuation, the movement toward becoming a whole and undivided self. It does not erase conflict, it makes conflict meaningful. The struggle between shadow and persona becomes the very place where energy is born. Without it, life is flat. With it, life becomes dynamic, creative, full of possibility. The challenge is not to eliminate tension, but to use it as a doorway. At this stage, many feel both fear and hope. Fear because letting the shadow speak risks judgment, rejection, or misunderstanding. Hope, because for the first time, life begins to feel real. The fear belongs to the persona, which has spent years protecting you from disapproval. The hope belongs to the shadow, which knows that true connection is only possible when the whole self is present. Both voices are necessary. To hear them clearly is to begin living consciously. So the struggle continues. One day, the persona wins, keeping you polished and quiet. The next day, the shadow breaks through, reminding you of what you have buried. Each battle leaves you weary, yet also more aware. Slowly, you begin to see the pattern as a cycle, not a curse. And with each cycle, the possibility of integration grows stronger. This is the meaning of the third stage. It is the confrontation with your own divided self. The mask you built for acceptance stands on one side. The exiled truths of your shadow stand on the other. They wrestle in dreams and conversations, in silences at night. It is not easy, but it is necessary. For only by facing both can you begin to step toward wholeness. The great danger is not in the shadow itself, but in refusing to face it. When ignored, the shadow distorts, becoming destructive. When acknowledged, it becomes a source of power and vitality. Jung wrote that the gold is in the dark. What seems shameful, dangerous, or improper often holds the very qualities that make life radiant again. Boldness, desire, joy, presence. These are not sins. They are gifts waiting for recognition. So do not fear the struggle. Let the persona speak, but let the shadow answer. Let the mask protect when needed, but never let it silence the soul. This is the delicate balance of individuation, to walk with both faces no longer divided, no longer ashamed. And in time, the struggle reveals its deeper purpose. The persona teaches you how to stand in society. The shadow teaches you how to live with yourself. Together, they form the foundation for the awakening that follows the moment when authenticity no longer feels like rebellion, but like the natural rhythm of your being. The struggle between mask and shadow can last for years, sometimes for decades. It is exhausting to keep one face for the world and another buried within. Yet there comes a turning point, a shift that feels less like struggle and more like recognition. It is the moment of awakening. Awakening is not dramatic at first. It is not fireworks or a sudden transformation. It is quiet, like dawn breaking after a long night. At first, the light seems faint. Then, slowly, you realize the whole landscape has changed. You begin to see your life with different eyes. What once felt normal now feels intolerable. What once felt shameful now feels natural. It is as if the soul itself has whispered, "No more pretending. Now you must live." Jung described individuation as the process of becoming who we are meant to be, beyond roles, beyond masks, beyond inherited expectations. Awakening is the first conscious step on that path. The persona no longer rules unquestioned. The shadow is no longer feared as enemy. Instead, a new inner witness arises, the self, the deeper center of wholeness that can hold both light and darkness without tearing them apart. In this stage, a woman often notices that she no longer wishes to negotiate with false beliefs. She sees the cultural lie that aging steals beauty. She recognizes that her value does not depend on being pleasing. She senses that attraction is not about youth, but about energy, presence, and truth. These realizations may not have words at first. They are felt in the body, in a deeper breath, in a stronger stance, in the willingness to meet her own gaze in the mirror. Symbols of awakening appear everywhere. The mirror once avoided becomes a doorway rather than a judge. Dreams shift, no longer repeating scenes of helplessness, but opening new landscapes where hidden rooms and forgotten gardens invite exploration. The old hallway of doors marked proper and good now shows another sign, free. To choose this door is to step into a space that feels risky yet alive. Such images are not fantasies. They are the language of the unconscious, guiding her toward integration. What awakens is not rebellion for its own sake. It is not a loud rejection of everything familiar. Instead, it is the calm realization that wholeness requires honesty. The persona may still serve in the outer world, but it no longer defines identity. The shadow may still carry forbidden impulses, but they are now approached with curiosity instead of fear. This balance brings a sense of freedom that no mask could provide. Think of how this feels in daily life. A conversation that once ended in silence now includes the word no spoken clearly without apology. A moment of intimacy that once followed a predictable script now opens into uncharted depth because desire is voiced without shame. A decision once shaped by duty now bends toward authenticity, even if it unsettles others. Each small act becomes a declaration: I will no longer betray myself. This shift has effects beyond the individual. When a woman awakens to her own shadow and integrates it, she changes the field around her. Others feel it. Some may resist, unsettled by the new energy that no longer bends to their demands. But those who are capable of depth respond with recognition, drawn to the authenticity that speaks louder than surface charm. Attraction is transformed from a game of performance into a resonance of souls. Awakening is also deeply spiritual. Jung observed that the feminine unconscious carries archetypes of renewal, of death and rebirth, of descent and return. To awaken is to walk this archetypal path consciously. It is to recognize that the pain of the fracture, the tension of the shadow, and the exhaustion of the persona were not meaningless. They were stages in an initiation, a passage into the deeper self. This realization brings both humility and strength. Humility, because one sees how much of life was lived under illusion. Strength, because one now knows that even in illusion, the soul was preparing for this very moment. The shadow that seemed like an enemy was in truth a guardian of energy. The persona that felt like a prison was also a necessary shell, protecting the seed until it was ready to break open. In awakening, all these opposites are reconciled. Nothing is wasted. Consider again the symbol of dawn. The night cannot be denied, for it gives birth to the morning. The shadows on the ground do not vanish when the sun rises. They shift, soften, and become part of the whole landscape. Awakening does not erase the past. It integrates it, turning wounds into wisdom and repression into radiance. This stage is often accompanied by a sense of presence. Instead of drifting through routines, one feels rooted in the moment. Time slows. Small gestures carry meaning: a breath, a touch, a pause before speaking. In this presence, the body feels less like an object to be judged and more like a vessel of energy. Every wrinkle becomes a story, every scar a testament, every curve a symbol of life lived and lessons learned. Such presence is magnetic. It draws others not because it tries, but because it simply is. Jung might say that the anima, the feminine soul image, shines most brightly when it is no longer hidden behind masks. To be present is to allow this radiance to flow without obstruction. It is not the performance of beauty, but the embodiment of wholeness. At first, awakening feels fragile, like a candle flame easily extinguished by old habits. The persona will attempt to reclaim control. The shadow may surge with too much force. Doubt will whisper. Perhaps you imagined it, but with practice, presence strengthens. Each time you return to authenticity, the flame grows steadier until it becomes a guiding fire that no wind can put out. Awakening is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new phase. To see the truth is one thing. To live it is another. After awakening comes the task of choice, to set boundaries, to act on what has been revealed, to create a life aligned with the self rather than the mask. But without awakening, these choices cannot be made. You cannot set a boundary if you do not yet know your own worth. You cannot choose authenticity if you do not yet recognize the mask. This is why awakening is so essential. It turns awareness into power. So let us name this clearly. Awakening is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you are beneath the persona, beyond the shadow, at the core of the self. It is the rediscovery of the original face you had before the world told you who to be. It is the first taste of freedom, the first breath of air after years of holding it in. It is not always comfortable, but it is always real. And with this awakening, the path ahead becomes visible. The choices that once felt impossible now appear as necessary steps. The relationships that drained your energy reveal themselves clearly. The practices that restore you call louder. Awakening brings clarity, and clarity brings courage. From here, the next phase unfolds, the act of choosing, the setting of boundaries, the transformation of life itself. Awakening alone is not enough. To see the truth is one thing. To live it is another. Many people awaken for a moment, feel the spark of recognition, and then return to the old mask because it feels safer. But individuation is not completed in silence. It requires action. It requires choice. It requires the setting of boundaries that honor the self instead of the persona. The moment of choice always carries tension. To choose yourself means disappointing others. To set a boundary means saying no to the familiar rhythm of sacrifice. This can feel harsh at first, but it is not cruelty. It is clarity. Jung often reminded us that individuation demands separation from the collective, not to abandon others, but to stand firmly in your own center. Without this step, awakening fades into a dream that never reshapes life. A boundary is not a wall against love. It is a door that makes love possible. Without boundaries, connection collapses into resentment. With boundaries, intimacy becomes alive because both partners can meet as whole beings rather than fragments. This is why the act of choice is sacred. It transforms vague longing into embodied reality. Think of how this feels in lived experience. A woman once accustomed to silence begins to speak her needs clearly. She does not explain them endlessly. She does not argue her worth. She simply states, "This is what I require." At first, her voice may tremble. Yet each time she chooses authenticity over compliance, the trembling steadies. Each time, she honors her desire instead of burying. Yet the ground beneath her feet grows firmer. Boundaries can take many forms. Sometimes, it is the refusal to participate in conversations that diminish her. Sometimes, it is the courage to slow down in intimacy and ask for what truly satisfies. Sometimes, it is declining roles that once drained her energy because she now knows her life force is not infinite. Each of these choices seems small, but together, they mark a profound transformation. They are the outward signs that awakening has moved into embodiment. Jung described transformation as the union of opposites. Here, the once hidden shadow now meets the persona in conscious action. The bold voice that once whispered from the dark is now spoken in daylight. The mask that once silenced desire is no longer allowed to dictate the terms of relationship. This is not rebellion. It is integration. It is the self taking its rightful place as the guide of life. There is a profound difference between demands and standards. Demands seek control over others. Standards set a clear path for the self. When a woman establishes a standard, she is not forcing anyone to comply. She is simply choosing to live in alignment with her truth. If others cannot meet her there, she does not shrink to accommodate them. She remains firm, knowing that her worth is not negotiable. This distinction is vital. Many confuse boundaries with selfishness. But a boundary is not about taking more. It is about no longer giving yourself away. It is the recognition that your energy, your time, your body, your voice, all of these are sacred. To treat them as expendable is to betray your own soul. To honor them is to align with the deeper self that Jung saw as the organizing center of life. At first, boundaries may bring conflict. Others who benefited from your compliance may resist. They may call you cold, difficult, or ungrateful. But these reactions are not signs that you are wrong. They are signs that you have changed the pattern, and patterns resist change. Yet in time, those capable of depth will adjust. They will respect what you respect, and those who cannot will fall away, making room for relationships built on mutual recognition. The act of choice also changes how one experiences attraction. When the shadow is integrated and the self sets clear boundaries, the entire energetic field shifts. A woman who once attracted those who fed on her compliance now radiates a different signal. She is no longer seeking validation. She is no longer bending to be chosen. She has chosen herself. And this energy draws forward those who can meet her authenticity with their own. Boundaries also bring freedom in solitude. She no longer fears being alone, because aloneness is no longer emptiness. It is presence. It is the space where she can hear her own voice without interruption. From this grounded solitude, choices become clear. She does not accept crumbs when she knows she is meant to feast. She does not chase approval when she has already embraced her own worth. This stage of transformation is not free from fear. The old persona still whispers, "What if they leave? What if you lose love? What if you are judged?" But awakening has already shown the truth. Love without authenticity is not love. Attention without respect is not nourishment. And a life lived in silence is no life at all. The fear may remain, but it no longer dictates the path. Symbols of this transformation often appear in dreams. The locked door that once seemed impossible to open now swings wide. The mirror no longer reflects a stranger, but a familiar gaze that feels steady and whole. The shadowed figure that once threatened now stands beside you, an ally rather than an enemy. These images reveal that integration has taken root. The unconscious affirms what the conscious mind has dared to live. The greatest gift of boundaries is peace, not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the deep peace of knowing you have remained true to yourself. This peace radiates outward, touching every aspect of life. In relationships, it creates space for real intimacy. In work, it allows focus without burnout. In solitude, it opens the door to creativity and renewal. Peace does not mean life is without struggle. It means struggle no longer divides you from yourself. This transformation is also contagious. When one woman chooses authenticity, others see it and remember their own buried truths. A sister, a friend, a daughter. Each may feel permission to set her own boundaries because she witnessed it lived. This ripple effect is part of individuation's mystery. The more one person becomes whole, the more wholeness becomes possible for the community. We should also be clear. Transformation is not a final arrival. It is a rhythm, a continual practice. Boundaries must be maintained. Choices must be renewed. Old masks will try to return, especially in moments of fatigue or vulnerability. But each time you choose alignment again, the path grows clearer. Transformation is less about perfection than persistence. So this is the fifth stage, the passage from awakening to action. The moment when inner recognition becomes outer reality. The step where individuation is no longer an idea, but a lived standard. Jung called this the path of becoming whole, and it always requires courage. Yet once taken, the rewards are immeasurable. Because from this place of choice, the final stage becomes possible, integration and reflection. To look back, not with regret, but with gratitude. To see how the fracture, the struggle, the awakening, and the boundary have woven together into a life of depth. This closing stage is not the end of growth, but the beginning of peace. Every journey of transformation must find its still point, a moment where struggle settles into understanding. What began as fracture and conflict has led to awakening and choice. Now comes integration, where the pieces of self are gathered into wholeness. This closing stage is not about victory in the worldly sense. It is not about applause or approval. It is about inner alignment. The mask and the shadow no longer fight for dominance. They stand together, recognized as parts of one greater self. The great gift of individuation is that nothing is wasted. Every silence, every denied desire, every wound carried for years becomes part of the story that shapes presence today. Even the persona that once constrained you had its role. It protected you until you were strong enough to step forward. Even the shadow that once frightened you carried the energy needed to restore vitality. Integration means seeing that all of it belongs. In this stage, peace feels different. It is no longer the fragile peace of keeping harmony by disappearing. It is the steady peace of knowing you can remain true to yourself even when others misunderstand. It is a peace rooted not in avoidance, but in clarity. From here, intimacy takes on new meaning. Attraction is no longer a performance. It is not a mask of youth or a demand for validation. It is the natural resonance of two whole beings meeting in truth. What once felt like a game of hiding and seeking now becomes a quiet recognition. I see you because I have seen myself. This is why mature love often carries a depth unknown to earlier years. The symbols of this final stage are simple but powerful. The mirror now reflects a familiar friend rather than a stranger. The locked door is open not to chaos, but to a garden where both shadow and light nourish the same soil. The path once feared is now walked with steady steps, not because fear has vanished, but because courage has grown stronger. Jung often said that individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. Wholeness includes imperfection. It includes contradiction. It includes the ongoing rhythm of shadow and persona desire, and restraint, solitude, and connection. To live from the self is to no longer deny these tensions, but to carry them consciously. This is the mark of maturity, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of integration. And so the lesson comes into view. A woman's worth does not fade with years. It deepens. Her presence grows magnetic not by imitating youth, but by embodying her own truth. The energy that draws others is not surface beauty, but the fire of a soul that no longer hides. What society once called vice becomes virtue. What was once shame becomes power. This is the quiet radiance of individuation. If you listen closely, you can feel how this truth applies to every stage of life. The fracture you once feared may become the opening that lets light in. The shadow you once avoided may hold the very qualities you need to flourish. The boundaries you once hesitated to set may create the peace you longed for. In this way, individuation is not abstract psychology. It is the lived path of becoming yourself. We close then with a reminder, both simple and profound. Time does not diminish you. Time reveals you. Each year strips away another mask, another illusion, another borrowed role until what remains is essence. And essence is what endures. Let this be the lasting image, a woman walking through daylight without apology. Her steps are steady, her gaze unflinching, her presence unmistakable. She does not ask to be chosen. She has already chosen herself. And in that choice, her soul radiates a beauty beyond age, beyond fear, beyond disguise. Before we end, I want to invite you to pause and reflect. Which part of this journey spoke most deeply to you? Was it the fracture, the struggle, the awakening, or the quiet courage of boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because in speaking them, you may discover another layer of your own truth. And if these reflections have touched something within you, remember to carry them gently. They are not demands for change, but invitations to wholeness. The self does not rush, it unfolds. Trust the rhythm. Trust the process. As Jung himself wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege belongs to you. Let it guide your steps from this moment onward.